Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And to you first timers, welcome for the first time to Ask Mark. I see our chat is already lit up. So awesome to see people from so many parts of the world tuning in. Normally I introduce the main man with talking about his accolades. He was the co-founder of Netflix, the first CEO. He's done all these amazing things. But I think today he has done the most amazing thing of his entire career. And I'm going to let you take a look. Please welcome Marc Randolph.
Hey, Dan. How's it going, man? Hello, everybody out there.
Pretty good.
I noticed that there were some people from Africa in the chat. So a big shout out to my homies. Pretty good. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween. Okay, yeah, your whatever you're drinking is not dosed. That is, in fact, Marc Randolph. Well, we're going to see a little bit more of Marc in a minute.
What are you implying, Dan?
No, you look different since the last time we saw you. Did
it's
you lose
very
weight? Have you been working out?
Drinking is difficult for me because it's a long way down to the water source. So I'm very careful about that. I prefer the tender leaves from tall trees, to be honest.
You're really sticking your neck out for some of these jokes, Marc.
Oh God, that hurt. So actually, Dan, this is actually, I'm going to do this from now on. It's almost great having an alter ego in a way. I could say whatever I want. It's like Triumph, the comic, dog.
Yeah, right. I was going to say you're like, it's like Jim Henson. You're the Muppets of business, maybe.
So Dan, are you dressed like as an old white guy? It's incredibly persuasive. Oh.
Oh boy, this is good. You're in for a treat today, people. This is fantastic. So,
oh God.
Okay. It is Halloween, and so we wish you all a very happy Halloween. Depending where you are in the world, maybe Halloween's already over. We hope it was good, or maybe it's just starting for you. But Marc, a lot of people in this chat say they dropped what they were doing just to tune into this, and I think they made the right call.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good one. I can tell already. I'm fired up. All right, I'm coming up. Here we go. Oh God, I'm too old for this. My neck hurts. All right, there we go. Whoa, my head.
Wow.
So,
all right.
Any of you considering being a giraffe for Halloween? It's a difficult one to pull to make work.
Hey, entrepreneurship isn't easy, nor is costume wearing. So
got the hooves in one hand anyway. Okay, let's get serious here.
Please. We're getting a lot of "I can't" comments in the beautiful. Well, as you already are doing, please send your questions to Marc. Marc the Giraffe. He is going to answer anything and everything. And I'll ask you this: keep it short, though. Sometimes we get paragraphs, and we're moving and shaking here. So a sentence or two question. We'd love to hear what you have to ask. And Marc, since it is Halloween, I thought we could start off on a spooky tip and ask you, what was your scariest moment in business besides this exact minute?
This is terrifying. No, and it's funny because I have a lot of them. I mean, a lot of times when you're going, oh no, this is terrible. But as with most things you're scared of, the more times you get scared, the less scary it is when it happens. So I actually, if I had to think about it, it's quite a while ago. And marginally, I would say it's in business, which is I was running an outing club in college. I was president of an outing club, and we used to do these big equipment sales, and we would gather up hundreds of people's orders, and then place it as a big bulk order and get a big discount. And the outing club would get the spread between what people were paying and what we had negotiated for this bulk order. And I so remember we did it, and we had very big, tens of thousands of dollars. And all of a sudden, I was doing the math, and I realized that the treasurer of the outing club had made a mistake in the pricing. And in fact, we had captured way less money than it was actually going to cost us to get this equipment. And I so distinctly remember it as I began hyperventilating, and I was kind of having this panicky feeling, which I mean, almost someone who's. I mean, I don't have suffer anxiety, but I know people who do, and it really was bordering on this full on anxiety attack. And I went to school in a very cold part of the world, and this was the middle of the winter. And I remember just putting clothes on and walking out in the middle of this snowstorm and wandering around for like an hour trying to get myself back under control so that I could figure out where to go from here. But it was a terribly scary thing. And in a nutshell, it was the fear of a surprise. Something happened you didn't expecting that could be potentially catastrophic, and you were not ready for that. And like I said before, I've had plenty of those since then, and each one sequentially gets easier and easier. And now I don't scare so easy.
As evidenced by your wardrobe today, you are fearless. um, and yeah, I was going to ask, when you're going up for those high leaves, any surprises up there in the trees as you're grazing?
No, it's truly. Oh, wait, oh, I see where you're going with this, Dan. And actually, this is a great point. Giraffes do not graze, young man. Uh, Giraffes browse. And you came here to learn more about entrepreneurship, but here's an important lesson. Grazing is like what cows do. It's eating food off the ground. Browsing is eating food that's off the ground in bushes, or in my case, from the tops of tall trees. Browsing. Thank you.
Well, I think we wrapped it up. We got to everything we needed to get
Okay.
to. Thanks for joining. Okay, let's start to dig in. And here's a scary moment that a lot of people are dealing with, whether or not you're a small business owner. This is from Angeline Base. She says, "I own a small restaurant. This inflation is killing us. What should be the game plan?" She says her spirits are down. She's feeling burnt out. Is there any way out of this?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I mean, restaurants are all struggling with the fact that the costs of everything is increasing, but the consumer tolerance for higher prices is a lot slower to adapt. And all of us walk into a restaurant and go, "Oh my God, this costs this." So it's one of those things where you're stuck between the proverbial rock and the hard place. So certainly I'm not in the restaurant business, but when these things happen, this really calls on your pricing creativity. And certainly there's a lot of best practices that I've seen out there as a consumer. I mean, just last night we went out to dinner and we saw that tacked on, what was it, 6% or 15%? Some large service charge that ostensibly was going to pay for health care and services for the employees, but was certainly just one more way to begin to bring the average price of the ticket up to allow the restaurant to make ends meet. So I guess this is one of those classic cases of doing things the way you've always done them is not necessarily a good recipe for business success. And certainly now that you're faced with a situation that most restaurants and a lot of businesses are having, now's the time to start being creative and saying, what other ways can you use to start closing that gap so that you actually have a repeatable, scalable model?
We are getting a lot of questions in the chat, and a lot of giraffe puns. So appreciate those. People hoping you don't have a sore throat, because for a giraffe that would be extremely painful. So
I saw some about low-hanging fruit. I
yeah,
saw,
yeah,
yeah, okay.
it's all happening. But a couple of questions. Matt Jaffa is one of these who asks about apps. His question specifically is about he doesn't have a lot of money to advertise. How does he get the word out on his app? And there was an earlier question about just finding, what's your criteria or suggestions for finding a good third-party builder for your app idea? So if we want to sort of bucket those together
Well,
and
they're two.
browse through them.
Oh God, this is going to be pain. This is going to be the painful part of this whole episode. Forget my throat. It's the puns. They're actually, I think, two different things. Let's take them in order here. Let's take, first of all, the building it. Listen, it's a great idea to use a third-party service to quote unquote build your app. But gosh, the single biggest danger you can have is feeling that you need to build your entire app. And I've said every single time we've done this segment, the real trick here is figuring out how to not build all of it, especially if you're paying somebody else to do it. The real trick is to break this problem down and go, what am I really curious about? And have the developer build the most skeletal thing you can possibly imagine, just enough for you to throw this out and test it. It does not need to be polished. It does not need to be finished. It really can be rough. And you'll see that will dramatically decrease two things. One is the price, way fewer hours, but more importantly, it way decreases the amount of skill that the development shop needs to have. So rather than thinking about where do I find the developer shop to do this, because there are thousands of them, I'd really be focusing on what's the smallest thing that I could possibly build that'll allow me to start getting feedback right away. And I'll also throw in there, if you can figure out a way to start getting feedback without actually building an app, by basically faking it, by using longhand, behind the scenes, pencil, yellow pad, calculator, spreadsheet, whatever you can to do as much behind the scenes with simple things, the better. That's one. Let's talk now about getting the word out. And it's a very, very similar answer in that I don't want you to spend a lot of money on it. Whether your idea is successful or not is not dependent on how beautiful and fully featured the app is, which is why I said go simple. It also is not dependent on how broadly you can broadcast this. If I have 1 million people who know about it, everyone's going to love it. No, it's got to work at a small scale first. You do not need a lot of people. And there are lots of ways to get the word out at a small scale. I mean, for one, is to begin creating some kind of thought leadership for yourself. You can get you can get a platform by being on the social media channels and by getting to find people who are interested in the thing you want to talk about or want to do, and then eventually begin rolling out, and here's what I'm working on, and here's why you should do it. You can certainly do relatively inexpensive programs to get some initial traction. You can do things by doing the simplest one, things like Google AdWords or doing Facebook ads or doing Instagram ads, and not spending a lot of money on it. Because again, the idea is not to get 1 million viewers. The idea is to get a few and see how well it's working. But fundamentally, the most important thing you want to do is figure out how to make your app viral so that the first 10 people tell the next 20, and that first 30 tells the next 90. And the virality is probably the thing you should be focusing on more than anything else. All right, there you go. There you have it.
There you have it. Well done, Mr. Giraffe.
From the giraffe's mouth.
There it is.
Right to your ears.
So I want to ask you a little bit about traction, because so for those of you who haven't been watching, Marc is one of the stars of Entrepreneur's show, Entrepreneur Elevator Pitch, where entrepreneurs come on and pitch their ideas in 60 seconds or less to see if they could score a deal. A lot of times they do, but sometimes, Marc, you and the other investors, when someone comes in really early, you guys are a little wary because they don't have traction yet. So I'm wondering, starting small, what is, if you can't walk in a room and say, there's 1 million people using my app, like, what are the things you, as on the investor side of things, would be looking at to say, well, there's only this many people, but I could see it's going in the right direction?
Yeah, and listen, this is not one size fits all. A lot of investors have very different perspectives. But I think what I've seen is that what people really want to do is see traction. And they don't just want to see traction as a checklist item. What they're trying to demonstrate, what they're trying to see is there a there? Is all this enthusiasm you have about how amazing this product or service is going to be, is it true? Are people actually going to use it? And are they going to use it the way you say they're going to use it? And to prove that, you do not need a lot of people. I would much rather see a handful of people who've been using the app or the business or the service for 6 months than I would to see 10,000 people have used it for 2 weeks. I really want to see how engaged are they? How frequently do they come back? What's their behavior like? And let me give you a concrete example. This is someone I just had a phone call with a few days ago. He had a business idea and he was percolating on it for about a year, 2 years, and he was waiting because he thought he couldn't start until he had raised a lot of money and could do a big marketing campaign and finish building the app. And because he hadn't started yet, he couldn't raise all that money. So he was in this catch-22. And what we said was, listen, just do 30 customers. Bring on 30 people and run this in a very rudimentary fashion. And let's see how those 30 behave. Let's not just say, here's what I think will happen when you're pitching an entrepreneur. You'll be able to say, here's what does happen. You'll be able to address all of the concerns, and you'll shift the thing that the investors are concerned about away from, will this actually work? Which is the fundamental thing we worry about. It'll shift it over to, is this person going to be able to scale? Or, okay, it works in San Francisco. Is it going to work in Iowa? Or, well, okay, they were able to sell, when it's the CEO doing the selling, can they actually bring on a sales team? Those are much, much better questions to have an investor asking than, I have no idea whether what you're saying about how customers are going to behave is true.
That's great. So speaking of behavior, as entrepreneurs, a lot of us, we are so passionate about the thing we're doing, but maybe the team, we don't feel the same passion coming from them, Mark, not the same fire in their bellies, it seems like. And one of our LinkedIn users is asking, how do you deal with when you notice that sorry, it just scrolled away. When there's a lack of productivity in your founder team, if your other co-founders don't feel like they're pulling their weight.
Wow. Yeah, I do. I'll answer this question a different way somewhat. So I do a reasonable amount of mentorship. I work closely with these small founding teams. And when the companies ask me to be a mentor to them or to help them, they usually think that what they're looking for is advice about the tech stack or the go-to-market strategy or how to do fundraising. But that's not what ends up being the dominant conversation. It's usually about founder dynamics. It's how do I get along with these people? And it's especially tricky when, as is the usual case in a tech startup, one of the co-founders is a business side, one co-founder is a technical side, and one's from Mars and one's from Venus. And it's a very, very difficult working relationship. But that doesn't solve the problem that you've already jumped into. This is for people who are still in the process of going, all right, I'm looking for a co-founder. How do I find this? And it really is like a marriage. And so the first thing, of course, is figure out some way to trial run so that you have a sense of, does this person have a similar work ethic to you? Is this someone that you actually can communicate with? But the other one is, once you're going, this is a leadership challenge. This is you trying to understand, why isn't this person pulling their weight? And there's a lot of reasons for that. One, it could be, well, they're just not that into this anymore. That's an obvious one. One is they're not competent. One is they're not quite sure where we're going. And these are all things that, if you are the main partner, can try and solve those things by being very, very clear about where we're going, about making sure this person has sufficient motivation. And here's the tough part. If it gets to the point where you go, I've kind of worked through why this person is not motivated, it just turns out either they're not talented or they're completely demotivated and not into this. Well, it's your job to then sit them down and say, it's time to say goodbye. You can't keep carrying dead wood. You can't keep trying to resuscitate this.
And what if you're like me, Mark, where when you tell me that, I just don't listen and I just keep sitting here talking to you?
Yes, right.
You've tried it, but I'm not going anywhere.
Listen, it happened. I guess one other thing I'll add is you're not alone. This happens all the time. It's a really, really common thing.
Yeah.
But so a lot of it is self-inflicted. You say, "Hey, will you be the co-founder?" And you're the one going out and pitching to VCs. You're the one going to the conferences. You're the one setting you're doing all the fun stuff, and the other person's going, "Well, what's the point?"
You're
And it's on you when that happens. It's a partnership.
yeah.
You've got to make sure people are fully engaged, and most of the time you can fix that.
So we got a question that we pops up a bunch. This is from sorry, the chat is moving so quickly. The questions disappear before I could read them. It's the question was, oh, there it is, from Zay Wang. How do you pick which idea to work on? I have like 100 ideas.
Yeah, it's interesting because back when we started Netflix, that was like back in 1997. So, gosh, 25 plus years ago. Um, and then if you had an idea and you wanted to try it, it was really, really hard. You had to build the whole website yourself. You had to wire the servers yourself. You had to write your own portals to the bank, et cetera. And so the gap between the idea and the validation of the idea could be months, could be years, could be millions of dollars. And one of the huge advantages that everybody has today is that so much of that infrastructure is taken care of. Now, this I'm talking about a tech startup, but I think it applies almost any place. It's so much easier to get started and try an idea. And so much of the methodology is different. The thing I spoke about 2 questions ago about how the trick is not to figure out whether it works or not. Don't spend a year building a full app and then roll it out. The real sign of your ability as an entrepreneur is how clever you can be about figuring out a quick, cheap, and easy way to try it. This is all a long way of saying, try them all. Figure out a way to take that first idea on your list, sit down and go, how can I give myself a glimmer whether anybody cares about this idea, whether in fact the thing that they think they would do, they would actually do, and try it. And most of the time, and I do a huge amount of work with early stage entrepreneurs on exactly this thing, it is almost always you can figure out a way to get feedback, real feedback on your idea in less than a week for less than $100, and tell you, is this something that A, is interesting, and B, that the customers find interesting? And you keep churning through, and you'll be amazed how many you can go through. I mean, Reed and I brainstormed hundreds of ideas before we picked the one to go all in on, and it is extremely common right now. Don't pick one, try them all.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, we've gotten a lot of questions. One that came in earlier from Dina Paulino. It kind of feeds off of that. She wanted to know, what is the one smartest risk you took that paid off? And then a couple of people in the chat are asking, what is the risk you took that you wish you could take back?
What is the smartest risk I took that paid off? God, a lot of them. I mean, there is one risk that I've taken a whole bunch of times, and it's the risk of, I wonder if I can figure this out. In other words, it's that courage to start down the trail without knowing what's around the corner. And if you spend all your time trying to do the research of what's there, by the time you start, it's too late. And so certainly I've taken that risk time and time and time again. And just using the Netflix example, at the time, we had no clue whether people would actually do DVD by mail, because that was the original idea. And in fact, everyone we told the idea said it was a stupid idea and would never work. And they had all kinds of very valid reasons. Did I know how I was going to make it work? Absolutely not. In fact, it took 1.5 years after launching to finally figure out how to make it work. So the risk was, let's start and let's see if we can figure it out. And that one certainly worked. But it happens over and over and over again when you take this risk that you're not sure. So I think starting Netflix was a big risk that ultimately paid off. And I'm trying to think of what risks I took, but it's not the question's different. It's because I picked a risk which worked, but the reality is that almost all of them don't work. So there isn't a single one that I can point to and go, I took this risk and it didn't work, because it almost never works. And that's just the reality of being an entrepreneur. And the trick is that, can you find the pony in there, which is, you do something that doesn't work, almost always you learn something really interesting. So
the pony or the giraffe? What are we looking to find in there? I'm
yeah.
sorry, it was just, you just put it right out there. I had to.
Okay.
We'll get to a couple of more quick questions, and then we'll set everyone loose to go get their sugar rush. So speaking of risk taking, we've gotten a couple of questions in here about people trying to figure out, how do I work up the nerve or know that the time is right to make the jump from my 9-to-5 job to being an entrepreneur?
That's a great question. The answer is, don't jump too quickly. I know that sounds counterintuitive to what you might think I was going to say, which is, yes, go do it, quit. But no, my advice more often than not is, don't quit your day job. Don't drop out of school. The way to make risk manageable is to not make it a catastrophic problem if it fails. And the beautiful thing about society these days is that we don't go to school all day. We don't go to work all day. We do it 8 to 10 hours. And there's plenty of other time. You have weekends, you have evenings, you have early in the morning. Do your startup then. Do as much as you can on the side. So listen, you have enough risk of putting all that effort into something you're not sure it's going to work. Don't also add to your anxiety by going, oh my God, I only have enough money left to pay the rent for 6 months, or I can't afford my health insurance, or I can't afford my car payment. My God, that's an awful feeling. So if you can keep your day job, if you can stay in school, do it. What it doesn't mean is, don't think just because you have a day job or going to school that you can't start something. That is the most grievous error I can imagine. Start small. Do something you can do after work. Do something you can do in the morning. Do something you can do between classes at school. Do something. And the answer of when to jump, you will know. There'll be two things happening. You'll have probably pretty close to having product market fit. All of a sudden you will go, this thing is taking off on its own. I'm not just forcing it. I'm not pushing it. It is going. And I can't keep up. And if I really want to keep up, I've got to jump in. And I think I have enough confidence that it's going to go, that I can do that. It's not saying it's not scary at that point either, but you'll know.
That's awesome. I love that. Let's get two more quick ones. Well, maybe this one's not so quick, but Alusola Oni. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Little homework for the group. Mark, she asks, or they ask, what are the 3 major habits that you feel, entrepreneurs who are successful, that you've seen, they have these habits? Maybe you have these habits for people around you. What are common traits that you see people do every day?
Biggest one is focus. That people, the most successful entrepreneurs I see, don't get easily distracted. And more importantly, they've learned how to put blinders on and pick one thing to work on. And I've said this before too, but startups have 100 things that are all crying out for attention, but 98 of them, of those at 100, don't really make the difference between success and failure. 1 or 2 of them do. And the best entrepreneurs have the ability to identify those 1 or 2 and stay focused on them. And they put 300% effort into the top 2 rather than 50% effort into the top 20. That's certainly one. There's a persistence element to successful entrepreneurs is that, or they use, I guess the pop culture term for it is grit. They are okay being uncomfortable and trying and trying and trying and trying again, and don't get discouraged easily. I mean, they get knocked down, sure, nurse their wounds a little bit, and then all of a sudden a new idea, and they jump up and they're back into it. That's another really important one. And quite frankly, the other one is these usually they have some kind of really cool leadership skill to them. They're really, really good at getting people to, they project their enthusiasm. They can speak with clarity and confidence about where they're going, even if they're not entirely clear or confident themselves. And I think there's a whole bunch of things, but if I had to pick three, I'd say those are the three.
Awesome. Excellent. All right. We're going to get one more reader one and then one last one. So if you add that up, that's two more, Mark.
Okay.
So quick one. This is from Viola Tavaroski. Dear Mark, why do most people not read or respond to emails?
Oh, that's a interesting question, because I vowed quite a few years ago when I began kind of doing what I spend most of my time now, which is helping other entrepreneurs, that I would respond to everybody. And that was a little naive. And I still try and do it. But I think two reasons. One is that if you're in the middle of running a big company, it's a focus thing. You go, every minute that I spend responding to emails is a minute that I'm not spending on my core objective. And depending upon what level entrepreneur you are, you might get a lot of email. And, email is just like having someone knocking at your door all day and night. And if you spent all your time going to the door, you wouldn't get anything else done. That's different than ghosting. I'm not saying that if someone's been engaged with you, that they don't owe you the courtesy of responding. I'm just saying that sending cold emails to people, that yes, most of the time they're not going to respond, and you can't necessarily blame them for that. The other reason is for people like myself who say I do want to respond to everything. Occasionally I get overwhelmed. I mean, I get thousands, tens of thousands of emails every year, and I have all kinds of tips and tricks I use to try and get through it. But the answers get shorter and quicker, and you realize it's really, really hard to respond genuinely to that many people. And then when you have a big social media hit, I mean, if a LinkedIn one I recently did had, I don't know, 4 or 5 million views, and then it has, 5,000 comments. How do you respond to all that? It's just too much. So in other words, I'm not kind of trying to explain it away. I'm just saying have some empathy for people if they don't get back to you right away. They may be overwhelmed.
Absolutely. Well, in the spirit of your costume, I thought we could end on a high note, Mark. And
Good one.
Some comments in the chat and some we got earlier, but a theme of people feeling a little burnt out, asking how you kind of keep your head up. Wow, it's hard to not do these stupid puns, but if you could give everyone here maybe a little pep talk. Times are tough, and I think people could use a little encouragement, and who better than Mark Randolph in a giraffe costume?
Yeah, listen, I do have some words for you. Two things. One is, if you look back at history, most of the great companies are formed during down periods. I don't know why that is. I think it's a natural filter. It forces you cannot pursue things that are frivolous. During that exercise I described a few minutes ago, where you take 100 ideas and you do all of them, you don't get snagged by false positives, by, everyone it's the times are so good that everything seems to work. And that works really well until all of a sudden it doesn't. So in some ways, this forces us all to be realists. And as painful as that is, it's a good thing. The other thing, and this is perhaps maybe a little harder for people to acknowledge, but when I look back at all the times that I remember as being the best in my now 40 plus years of being an entrepreneur, almost all of them are the times when it was really hard. I don't look back and go, oh, that was so fun when it was cruising along. The things that I remember the most fondly are when it was terrifying or scary or things didn't work or I thought we were it was existential. I mean, my gosh, that's when you feel alive as an entrepreneur, especially if you manage to pull it out. So I know it doesn't help, but you will remember this later, and this will be the times. If you're having a hard time now, it'll be the time you look back on as when it was best to be a entrepreneur.
Oh, that's awesome. Sorry, one last question from a LinkedIn reader. Would you be open to cloning yourself for the betterment of humanity?
Interesting. In light of AI,
Right.
and currently playing with lots of different tools and seeing how close can you get to being able to give an answer similar to the answer that I would really give. So I know that's not quite what you meant, but it's funny. You're always looking for ways to try and be more efficient, and maybe there are ways.
Well, Mark, as always, amazing answers, great stuff, and for the audience, amazing questions. We got a lot of really great questions, a lot of different topics. So thank you so much for everyone for tuning in on this Halloween. It is Halloween. That is why Mark is dressed that way. You can check out more of Mark's words of wisdom at markrandolph.com. Anything else they should be looking for, Mark?
Well, listen, that question a few questions ago about answering email, I do answer almost every email I get sent. And so if you do have something you want to run by me, you'll find a way to contact me at markrandolph.com. You'll also find a link there to apply to join Neverland, which is my entrepreneurial community. And you can find me there too. Plus, follow me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and yes, TikTok.
Wow. If he does this on a webinar, you can imagine what he does on a TikTok. So I would recommend checking that out. And of course, watch him on Entrepreneur Elevator Pitch, new shows every week. You can find him on entrepreneur.com. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Happy Halloween to everyone. And we will see you again next time. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everybody.
See you later.